Hello, everyone. Hello. Hi, everybody. I'm going to get right into something that has been really on my mind recently, as of late. And that is going to be just the topic of burnout in the Black community, and why is it sometimes so hard for us to just chill. Recently, I feel like the Lord and other people in my life have really just been talking to me a lot about burnout. And I'm asking myself, why is it so hard sometimes for people in the Black community to rest, especially Black women? I feel like so many of the Black women that are in my life, so many Black women that I know, are always going. And I mean just going all the time. It's like there's something that always needs to be done, something that's always very pressing. And actually, let me turn this a little bit, y'all. Sorry, y'all. This is not the prettiest background today, but it's just going to have to do. Okay, hopefully this is okay. But yeah, why is it so hard for us to rest? And something that, as God has been speaking to me a lot about, just helping me to see some things in my own life when it comes to burnout and this sometimes just feeling like I just can't stop and I can't rest, or I have to do all of these different things. I realize that it's a trauma response. Like feeling like you always have to go, feeling like you always have to do, it's a trauma response. And it has caught up to me. I found myself getting so tired recently, and I'll do really well. I'll get into a season where I'm locked in and I'm not getting tired. I'm not getting burnt out. But then it's like when I have that space in my schedule, it starts to feel like, oh, okay, yes, I'm available for this. I want to serve. I want to help. I want to do all these things. But I'm like, why? And if anybody comes into the room, I would just love to hear your thoughts. I don't know if you're a person of color. If you're not a person of color, even if you're not, I would still just love to hear thoughts of why you think that in certain communities it's just really hard to rest. And I also recognize too that this is an American thing. Like in America, we never stop. We never stop. Since COVID, a lot of stores aren't open 24 hours anymore. Some people don't know what to do with that because, we're shopping at all times of the day, all times of the night. And it's like, why? So I just want to share some things that I feel like the Lord has been sharing with me in my own process when it comes to burnout. And being a Black woman is sometimes feeling like I don't have permission to slow down. So it says, beware of burnout. Um, Unaddressed burnout leads to bitterness, and unaddressed bitterness can lead to anger and discouragement. If we get to these points, we can end up taking our emotions out on people that had nothing to do with what has caused us to get to this point. So again, unaddressed burnout. And I don't mean like, sometimes we could feel like we're on the verge of burning out. We know we need to stop, and we tend to that. We recalibrate, we pivot, we reset. But unaddressed burnout can lead to bitterness, and unaddressed bitterness can lead to anger and discouragement. Then I just want to look at Luke chapter 10, verses 40 through 42. It says, but Martha was busy with all the work to be done. So going up to him, which was Jesus, she said, Sir, don't you care that my sister has been leaving me to do all the work by myself? However, the Lord answered her, Martha, Martha, you are fretting and worrying about so many things, but there is only one thing that is essential. Mary has chosen the right thing, and it won't be taken away from her. Okay. So in that, just using this scripture, and you may use something else as a reference point, but this is just the story that came up for me. Martha, in this particular story, Martha, she like, look, I'm doing all of this stuff. And instead of going to her source, going to God as her source and say, you know what, I'm tired. I'm tired and I need help. Can you help me? Can you strengthen me? Can you help me to recalibrate? What did she started to do? What did she start to do? When she saw that all she was doing, she went to blame. She started comparing all that she was doing to what somebody else wasn't doing. Okay? And I think that sometimes, like when we get ourselves on these hamsters wheels and we don't know how to stop, instead of us just looking at our own lives and recalibrating, it's so easy for us to start looking at what everybody else is not doing. I'm doing this and I'm doing that. If only the people could do this, and only if they would help me, if only they would recognize all the stuff that I'm trying to do. But people are not our problem. People are not our problem. Ephesians 6 and 12 says, "For we are not struggling against human beings, but against the rulers, authorities, cosmic powers governing this darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realm." People are not our problem. Okay? So when it comes to, even sometimes when we, again, the question is why is it so hard sometimes for us to rest? I think that just living with this constant hyper awareness of all that needs to be done. And let me say this. I think that, as for me, being a Black millennial, I feel like on one hand, I'm living in a time and an era where there seems to be more opportunity for Black people than there ever has been. So I feel like I live with this constant pressure to gain and cover all this ground that the people that went before me didn't have the opportunity to cover. They didn't have the opportunity maybe to get the degrees, but I do. They didn't, I have the degrees. They didn't have the opportunity to buy a home or have this and different things. So I do. So I feel like I have to go all the time and hustle to do all of these things. And that is just not true. That's not what God calls us to. Something else that came to me, and this is just some things that I was writing with my time with God. Um, our lack of boundaries and the inability to say no, wait, or pause is often what creates our problems when it comes to burnout. Our lack of boundaries and the inability to say no, wait, or pause is often what creates our problems when it comes to burnout. And again, I think for me, just sometimes feeling like I was recently in a group, right? A small group. And in my small group, I was the only woman of color in this group. And we were talking about different things. And we were talking about rest and taking a break and like really just stealing away sometimes from people in the world and just having a moment. And I told them, I was like, y'all, if I'm totally honest, as a Black woman, like I don't always feel like I have that luxury. Straight up. I don't always feel like I have the luxury to just say, I'm going to put a pause on life because I know that everything's going to be taken care of. And so, yeah, and it's just, I'm just really beginning to think like, why is it hard in our community for us to do this? Sometimes, again, talking about burnout and talking about not knowing how to rest, like, why is it so hard? Even when we know we need to, even when we know we need to rest. Sometimes it may not even be that we are doing too much, but that we are doing too little of what we're actually called to and too much of what we're not even graced for. So we could be good at a lot of things, but it doesn't mean we have the grace in this season for that particular thing. And I think sometimes we can really get tired too, um, and find ourselves getting to that point of burnout and then not knowing how to rest when we're doing too little of what we actually love. So there's that too. So yeah. So again, I guess this is too touching on burnout. And it's like, is hustle culture really what's good for us? And sometimes I wonder, like, is it even realistic? I think that it is, but I think sometimes even with social media, like you see everybody moving and shaking and they're doing all of these things and they're moving forward and they're making progress. And you don't even know that these people have been doing this for 10 years. These people may have been doing this for 10, 15, 20 years, but you might feel like, man, everybody else is progressing. Everybody's doing this. Everybody's doing that. And then I feel like we don't give ourselves permission to rest. We don't give ourselves permission to pace ourselves. Um, and I just see it really bad in the Black community, like being in a position where, I've lived in places where, hi, hello from the UK. Thank you so much. And if anything pops up, if you have any thoughts on what I'm saying, I'd love to hear from you guys that come into the room. But living in places where I'm not the minority, so it's majority, African Americans or Black people, then being in a place where I am the minority and I'm surrounded by mostly white, Caucasian, or European people, I realized that in the Black community, we do not get enough rest. We're not getting enough rest. We live in a, like, we get super stressed out. And I think for a long time that I just thought that that's just what I was supposed to do. Like I just truly have felt like I don't have permission to rest the way that other people do, but that's not true. God wants us to have boundaries, you guys, and it's okay. I truly believe that the powers that be that are not of God, the enemy, the devil, whatever you want to call it, um, does not like really wants us to be too busy to enjoy our lives. However, I believe that God is always trying to invite us into rest. Matthew 11, verse 28 through 30 says, "Come to me, all of you who are struggling and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, because I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. My yoke is easy and my burden is light." And so, yes, like I think for me, I'm just realizing, if I could be totally transparent, that sometimes rest can feel like I'm just not doing enough. And I will fill up my entire day with things. And they can be good things, and they can be noble things, and they can be beautiful things, serving and all of this. But rest is so important. And I've just began to see so many women of color and men of color pass away very, very young, you know, to the point, like, just from the stress that we put on our bodies and not taking care of ourselves and not saying no, because I think there's just this collective sense that we have to grind in order to get to where, um, other people are. And I know for myself, I'm just been praying through freedom from that, like to just be able to have space in my day. And it's hard sometimes. And I'm like, man, what is it again, with me, with our culture, that we just feel like, and Viola Davis said something recently that I saw. And she was just like, when you feel like you can never rest and you feel like you have to grind, 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 that is trauma. That's a trauma response. And for me, I'm really beginning to recognize, like, this is trauma, because anything that we're doing all the time and we feel like we have to do it, but it's not actually producing like really good fruit in our lives, like, it's probably not God. Like, there's some things that I just have to get up and do. I have to get up and make a meal for myself. I have to drink water. I have to, you know, find ways to have income, to take care of myself, things like this, but those things, I could see the benefit of those things. However, I think sometimes we could just get into a place, and now hear me, I'm not saying that working hard is wrong. I'm not saying that going is wrong. I'm not saying that doing these things is wrong. But when it gets to the point where our health, we can really, it is essential we align with God, and He will show us the footprint of our lives. Yes. Yes, I love that. Then we wouldn't have to hustle so hard. That is so true. And I think I really think that it's just a tool of the enemy. I really do. I think it's a tool of the enemy to wear us out and make us think that we have to go, 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 do, 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 do. Then where's the space for the Lord to do anything? Where's the space for God to do anything if we feel like we have to do everything, to the point that we're running ourselves in the ground? Okay? And I've seen it so much, like people, people of color, like literally 30s, 40s, 50s, like really, really sick because of the stress that we're putting on our bodies. And y'all, even let me tell y'all my testimony, where God really began to deal with me and be serious with me about, Jasmine, you have got to really learn how to say no. And like I said, I'll get into a season where I'm really obedient in it. And then I'm in this place of ease, right? I'm in this place of comfort, not even comfort, but things are just balanced and aligned. And then I'm like, oh, I could take on this, I could take on that. People are always inviting me to speak, inviting me to do things, and it's an honor. But it's like I have to realize when God is telling me to do something, and when He's telling me, like, Jasmine, you need to put a pause on that. So back in, I want to say it was 2019. I know that it was before COVID. I was, I think in that time, my daughter was 3 and my sons were 2. So I have twin boys that are 2 years old, and I have a daughter that's not even a year older than them. So we had our kids back to back. So, um, and during this time, I'm working, I'm leading in ministry, I'm doing all of these different things. And one day I'm like itching. I just start itching like real bad every day. And I'm like, man, like I'm so itchy. So I went to the doctor finally, and I'm like, Doc, what's going on here? And this doctor was like, you have shingles. Mind you, you guys, at the time I was like 20, 28, going on 29. And I'm like, shingles, like, and she was just like, are you under a lot of stress? Like, you're probably doing too much. And I laughed. If I'm telling you, I laughed. And I'm like, my life is like, I'm like, what could I do? I have my babies, I have my husband, I'm working, I'm doing these different things. Like, it just felt like I had no choice but to do this, which was so untrue. So untrue. If I would have laid down all of the extra things that I was doing outside of my family, outside of my home, like the Lord would have, he's not holding us to these impossible standards. It's really us. And I've really had to dig deep and say, what in me makes me think that I have to keep going at all times, even when I know that my body is not feeling it? What in me is making me, what in me is telling me, like, what is the lie that I'm believing that keeps telling me, you have to do these things, you have to do this? And if I'm honest, at that season in my life, I really felt like if I stopped, God would be mad at me, or somebody would be mad at me. You know, I really believe that. I don't believe that now. Praise God for prayer and deliverance and even therapy, y'all. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I went to therapy, and I remember my therapist asking me, she was just like, is it hard for you to say no to people? And I was like, it's not no hard for me to say no to people, but it is hard for me to say no to God. Like, if I feel like I'm saying no to God, you know? And so I had to really reframe and allow the Lord to deliver me, that he wasn't demanding in any of these things from me. And just going back to that scripture in Mark 10 verses 40 through 42, where Martha, it says she was busy with all the work that needed to be done. So yes, there was work that needed to be done. So she went up to Jesus like, sir, don't you care that my sister has been leaving me to do all the work by myself? However, the Lord answered her, Martha, Martha, you are fretting and worrying about so many things. That's another thing too, is I don't even think that it's the work. It's not the work that is the problem, but when the work becomes something that has us worrying, and when the work has something that has us fretting, when we're doing that, and then we're looking at people and what other people ain't doing and comparing ourselves and, oh, look at all that I'm doing, and if they would only pull their weight, like Jesus was like, there's only one thing that is essential. Mary has chosen the right thing, and it won't be taken away from her. So a lot of times though, we can go after all of these other things, but then try to be like, now Lord bless it. Help me to have rest in the middle of it. But he's like, go for the essential thing first. He was like, I'm the essential, I'm the essential. God is the essential thing. Not all of this stuff. And I've just been having a lot of conversations though with other women, and definitely seeing that in our community. And this may be something that happens in other communities as well. But I'm not part of like other communities as much. So I don't know. I definitely know it's something Western. So it's probably something that Western people deal with a lot. But I know for sure in the Black community, just this thing of like not being able to rest, or feeling like we have to prove ourselves, or putting so much pressure on ourselves to gain ground that other people um couldn't. And I know sometimes I definitely feel that pressure of I have my bachelor's degree, I have my master's degree, so I should be able to do this and this. I should be making this amount of money to do. Yes, I agree. I agree. Yes, I agree. I do believe that it's an American thing to just go all the time, and it's not, but it's not a God thing. I'm sorry, it's just not. It's not a God thing. And that doesn't mean go. And I think too that sometimes the Lord will even give us a greater capacity in certain seasons. He may give us that capacity. You know, there's scriptures that's talking about being able to run with the horses. Like, there may be certain seasons where He's given us that capacity, but in those seasons, in those times, He's graced us to do it, which means my body is going to be able to keep up. My spirit will be able to keep up. But in those seasons, I'm like, what about the seasons? And I remember the Lord asking me a question once. He was just like, Jasmine, even if I told you to stop, would you? Could you? Could you stop? If I told you to, if I was inviting you into a season of rest. And I'm like, Lord, and I think too, it's hard because sometimes I feel like rest never comes, like rest in our culture is not, it doesn't always feel convenient. It doesn't always feel convenient. Times where I feel like I know I need to pull away, I know I need to steal away, all I see is just a looming task in front of me. There is always something to do. And God just be like, we have to learn how to say no. Absolutely. And I love how you said learn how to say no. Because I think that when we're children, we are taught to just do as we're told. If somebody asks us to do something, then we say yes. Like, that's the right thing to do. So we do have to learn to say no. I don't think that it's natural for us. You know what? So you said even to ourselves, learning to say no. I recently told someone this. They were like, is it hard for you to say no to people? I got this question again. And I'm like, I'm realizing that it's not so much that it's hard for me to say no to people, but it's hard for me sometimes to say no to myself. Because I see that with a lot of different things. Like, if I want something, sometimes it's hard for me to say no to myself outside of me hustling, outside of me grinding, outside of the time commitments that I have. But sometimes I'll want something and I just want to get it. And it's like learning to say no to other people and things and invitations and stuff like that. But also learning to say no to ourselves. It's hard. And I think that's another thing too that makes it's just, y'all, it's just so much, I think, confusion that could try to come in the world right now, in the culture that we live in, where it's like, say yes to yourself for everything. Like, put yourself first, give yourself the thing, and indulge yourself. Like, this just very, like, indulge yourself society. We either grinding or we're indulging ourselves. And it's like, where's the balance? But the balance is in God, and the balance is in His truth. There's a time for everything. Ecclesiastes talks about that word. There's a time for everything under the sun. There's a time, there's a time for war. There's a time for peace. There's a time for all of these things. And so just being able to recalibrate, but not getting ourselves into this mentality of, I have to hustle all the time. There may be seasons where God is like, you know what? Do this thing, stay focused. You might get a little tired, but just hold on, hang in there. Something that my coaches say all the time is just to stay strong enough, long enough. Okay, there might be seasons of that, but that's not going to be the consistent season all the time. Like, that is not going to be for the rest of your life. That is the season of you hustle, 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 do, 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 go, go, go. No. Even like in the Bible, like God invites us every week into a Sabbath, like into a Sabbath that we're supposed to honor. And what's funny is I feel like even in, modern day, like, I want to say Christianity, but just in the lives of many believers, we know the Ten Commandments, y'all. But the one commandment that I feel like you don't hear nobody talking about is the Sabbath. Like, that's part of the Ten Commandments. Like, it is literally a commandment to rest. Not just a suggestion, not just something that we might do, but it is literally a commandment in the same lines where it's like, put God before everything else. Don't have any idols. Don't commit adultery. Don't steal. Don't do these things. Don't covet. It was just as big of a deal for God to put in the Ten Commandments for us to rest. Like, it's that serious. But we don't. Like, we don't. And what's the most mind-blowing thing is there's people who I see, I look at my elders and I sometimes look around and I'm like, Lord, people that are doing so much amazing, they're doing so many amazing things. Their health is just not the best. And it makes me think sometimes like, man, like, I wonder if we just took care of ourselves a little bit better, if we gave ourselves a little bit more space, if we learned to say no a little bit more, um, could our health even be better? You know, with our health as a people and as a community, you know, would it flourish more? But I know that this is something I see it too. I try to tell my parents to rest more. Yeah, y'all, I'm not even lying. Like it really concerns me. Like it really concerns me. So I don't want to get emotional. But my grandmother, she was an amazing woman of God. Like everybody in our city knew her. When she passed away, the mayor of our city came out. Like there was like standing room only to a point. Like there was all the seats were packed, so they had to actually have people in the overflow room. Me too, girl. We're like money, yes. And my grandmother passed away. Do you know my grandmother was 58? I was a sophomore in college. Now my grandmother was very young. My parents are very young, so you know. I was a sophomore in college, and my grandmother was 58 years old when she passed. And the older I get, the more I realize how young that is. But my grandmother, you know, she was up every day at the crack of dawn, you know, at church in the ministry on a prayer team, and she loved it. You know, she loved it. Um, she was she was a leader in her ministry. She was an entrepreneur, so she had her own business. Like my grandmother, she was doing it, y'all. She was that lady. Okay, everybody loved her. To this day, people talk about her. And I'm amazed at how much she was able to do in such a short period of time, you know, 58 years. But, you know, at the same time, I do have to stop and wonder, like, man, did she rest enough? Did she feel like she could rest? And she never seemed stressed out to me. But I know that I remember, you know, from what she passed away from, I'll never forget. I was talking to a doctor and they were asking for my medical history, and I was telling them, you know, some things that my family has dealt with. And when I told her what my grandmother passed away from, she was like, that is one of the most detectable, treatable forms of cancer. No, and she said nobody has to die from that. And I was just like, wow, that was a lot. And so sometimes I'm like, did my grandma even have enough room in her schedule to even get a checkup, to even go to the doctor, like to really take care of herself? You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. It's just like I find that it's difficult. Like we have to be convinced to rest. People have to beg and plead with us. You know, somebody said their parents, like, people gotta beg us to rest, to chill out. And I'm like, why is that? But I really do think that I just think it's not of God, you know. And again, I do believe that God gives some people a greater capacity for certain things that other people just don't have and just won't understand. So I'm not saying like sometimes it's just things that I don't get. And I have to say, you know what, Lord, you've maybe graced them for that. So that's fine. But I'm just saying in general, across the board, when it comes to our community, y'all, I want us to live. I want to live. I want to live, and I want to be able to live a long life. And I don't want to be stressed out all the time. And I'm not saying like that's not what's happening right now, but I do see that how I was getting to that point. And I'm so thankful that I got into God's presence and I just began to talk to him, and he was able to give me some things here. But he's like, girl, like my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Come to me and you will find rest for your soul. Like that's what we need, because I think that sometimes we could even be doing and we could be going. But if we're doing the things that we're called to do and not all a bunch of extra stuff, we can find so much rest and nourishment in our souls just from doing what God is saying do right at that moment. But it's when all the extra stuff is coming. And just that feeling of obligation, like doing things out of spirit of obligation, doing things out of a spirit of fear, doing things out of a spirit of survival. Like God didn't call us to that. He didn't call us to that. And like I said, like in this culture that we live in, especially, I think social media has made it worse to where we're seeing everybody's products, right? But we don't see people's process. We don't know how long it took for somebody to get to where they're going. And we show up on day 2 thinking we got to look like the person that's been doing this for 22 years. And we on day 2 and feeling like I can't rest, I don't know, but I just thank God for deliverance. I thank God for wisdom. And I just know that I'm heeding. I'm heeding what the word is saying. If we're in a position where we're just going, we're getting sick, but we're saying, oh, but it's the Lord's work. God don't want us sick. He don't want us stressed out. And so, yes, we do have to learn to say no. And sometimes it may not even be no. Sometimes we have to learn to say wait. Sometimes we have to learn to say pause, right? It may not even be a no. It may just be a not right now. So that's even another thing, like just discerning what season we're in. Are we in a season right now where we need to be going, or are we in a season where we need to rest? Excuse me, where we need to retreat, knowing the season that we're in. But again, I'm just finding that this is something that is a challenge I find in the Black community. Um, and I think that is because of trauma. I really do, and just survival, being in survival mode sometimes, and that being passed down to us. But I think there's value in the work that we do and the callings on our lives. However, I think we really have to uphold rest and know when God is calling us to a season of rest. So that's all I wanted to share, you guys. I would love to hear you guys' thoughts, those that have come into the room. Definitely share this with somebody that you think it might help, or that maybe you even want to talk to somebody about it. Hopefully it spoke to you. I know that it's been a topic that's really, really, really been heavy on my heart, as I've had to come to terms with the fact that I don't sometimes believe that I have permission to rest, and that is not of God. And so just leaning into scripture, sharing with my community. And so even just to hold myself accountable, I had some friends that were like, how can we help you with this as you are coming to this realization that you're entering a season where you know you have to take a step back? And I was like, well, I told them, I was like, y'all, I don't want it to sound mean. And they were like, what, you want us to stop asking you to do stuff? And I'm like, yeah. And like, don't let me say yes. Help me, hold me accountable. If I've said that, look, God is calling me to a season of rest, y'all, don't have me out here be done picked up all these things. Like, hold me accountable. And I know that's more so on me. That's my responsibility to be obedient. But it was just funny. Because sometimes people do be asking me to do a lot of stuff, and I get excited. I love serving. I love doing things with people and for people. But look, God is like, girl, when my husband find me in the kitchen like this, look, that's time to stop. We got to stop at that point. So, yeah, I hope this helped you guys. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. And yeah, I hope that this encouraged and helped y'all as I am being encouraged and helped through the Holy Spirit. God is good. And until next time, see ya. Okay. Before I go, so it says somebody said, where are you from? I'm from Noble, Alabama. Um, Whenever people say where am I from, I really don't know how to answer because I've lived in Illinois, Minnesota, Virginia, Indiana, and Florida. So I don't sometimes know how to answer that. I'm from a lot of different places. I've moved over 30 times in my life. Even that plays a part in, for me, just my own personal story of um why I sometimes feel that, like, just why I see why I think I always have to go. It's because I really, really desire stability for my family, just because growing up, stability just wasn't, as far as financial stability. My parents, they all I know is my parents together. They have all the same kids with each other. Like, they were married, they're still married. So as far as like a family unit, that was always stable. But as far as financially, it was a lot of changes constantly in my life, moving from state to state, at times not knowing where our next meal was going to come from. And so yeah, so I know that plays a huge part in sometimes why I feel like I can't rest. But to your question, I don't know where I would say I'm from, but I have lived in South Florida, Minnesota, Illinois, Chicago area, Indiana, and Virginia. But I was born in Gary, Indiana. Gary, Indiana, Gary, Indiana, Gary, Indiana, Gary, Indiana. Yep. And people know two things about Gary. Either that's where Michael Jackson was from, or that's the city that you go through and not a city that you go to, because people get really scared about Gary, Indiana. But yeah, I'm from Gary though. But you guys, like I was saying, thank you so much for those that just were chiming in and sharing. I love to talk about this with people and just different topics that will come to my mind and come to my life. Okay, you were born in Daytona Beach, Florida. Okay, I lived in Miramar, Florida, Pembroke Pines, Florida, and Hollywood, Florida. So I lived in all those places. So they were all like not too far outside of Miami. Like when we gave our lives to God, we ended up going to a church in Miami. So we weren't that far. Did I live anywhere else in Florida? Miramar, Pembroke Pines, Hollywood. That was it. Um, so yes, I know a lot of people. You're from Alabama. I know a lot of people in Huntsville, Alabama. Huntsville is, from what I hear, Huntsville is having some things, popping, some really cool things going on. I'm like, okay, Alabama, all right, I see you. But I love to see where you guys are from. Y'all can continue to comment. I'm gonna go ahead and end this video, but I really hope that this helped somebody, even those of you that have not yet watched but will watch in the future. I really hope that this helps you, and just know that you have permission to rest. It's actually a commandment, you guys. The same one up there with don't steal, don't kill, don't covet, don't have any idols, all these things. The Lord wants us to rest. He wants us to have a Sabbath. And it says that we weren't made for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath was made for us. Like, God is such a good father, and he cares about us. And he's a father that knows how to provide good care. He knows a father that knows how to care for our souls. And so when Jesus said, come to me, all who are heavy laden and struggling, like, my yoke is easy, my burden is light, and I want to give your soul rest. Like, we can really trust that. And we can really believe that. Um, you know what? It's on my heart to share one last thing. Um, and I don't think I've ever really talked about this online, but just another reason for me why for years I feel like I couldn't pause. I I grew up sort of in a ministry where I would hear things, and I'm not saying that this is what the pastor was trying to do, but I'll say what happened to me in the middle of all this. I grew up in a ministry to where when people left the ministry, our pastor, he would go in over the pulpit, okay, on different people. And I mean, y'all, it was to the point where I would see people, they would at this place, they would have like a lot of skits that they would do and stuff. And one time, um, we were visiting the church, and after my parents had left, so my parents had already left this church, and I went back to visit because for me, I'm like, I'm scared. I ain't trying to leave because, whatever, whatever. So when I would come back and visit from college, I would go and visit. And I came back and they had this skit, and they were like pretty much mocking somebody that had left the ministry. Okay. And it put so much fear in me. And this pastor, he would be like, yeah, this person left the ministry and their marriage fell apart, or this person left the ministry and their house burned down. And so I just always felt like I needed to really be committed to the things of God, like in a church ministry type setting. um and it just really made me very afraid to say no. And I would hear different messages like, always have a yes in your spirit for God. And I know that that's true. I know that's not the right spirit. No, it's not. And I was young hearing this. So I was a part of this church. So I was like, I just became a believer. My family had started coming to God. And I was like 16 when we started going back to this church. And then I went there pretty much up until I graduated to go to college. And, it was just a lot. Like, I really respected this person, and my parents ended up leaving. But yeah, I had such a sweet and very pure spirit. Like, I just always wanted to trust people and feel like everybody had the, like, I could see the good in people. And so I saw all the good in this pastor, but I didn't realize how insecure he was when it came to people leaving his ministry, and that's what he was speaking out of hurt. He's a shepherd, and when a shepherd loses, people, and they feel like, man, I've poured out my life for y'all and y'all don't care. Like, he was really preaching out of a lot of hurt. And so but all I hear at the time, like now as an adult, like as a grown adult woman, um in my 30s now, I can look back at that time and say, man, he was really dealing with some hurt and insecurity. And that's why he was saying this. But at the time, all I'm hearing coming across the pulpit is so and so left the church and they marriage done fell apart. And so I lived for a long time feeling like if I stopped doing certain things that that my pastors wanted me to do or somebody else wanted me to do, I lived feeling like my family was gonna be cursed. Y'all, because they literally would be talking like, if you leave this ministry, you got a curse. Like, if you leave the ministry, or if you disagree with, not even so much if you leave sometimes, because there will be people that left, but they would leave in a very honorable way. I will say that there were people in this ministry that did not always leave in an honorable way because of the things that they would hear. So when they would hear certain things, right, that's witchcraft for sure. For sure. For sure. And what's really sad though, y'all, and I'm not trying to come against this pastor or his family or nothing else, y'all. I do not like to come. I don't even care, because for me it's like, let God deal with him. I'm not gonna put my mouth on nobody. But what's so sad about this is I saw him and his wife work so hard and be so diligent and really give up everything for this ministry. And do y'all know that he passed recently? Super unexpectedly. And he was young. He was young. Like, and it was like everybody felt it. Because for years, this was a big church too. This church had a lot of people. And so for this to happen after, for years, even when my grandma passed, y'all, they was like, they were like, she must didn't have enough faith. Not she didn't take care of herself. Not she was going all the time, all of this. Because my grandma, if she would have took care of herself, y'all, the doctors told me that she had one of the most treatable, detectable forms of cancer, bruh. And my doctor literally was like, nobody has to die from that form of cancer. But they pretty much was like, somebody didn't have faith. And then, y'all, like recently he passed, and it just, to this day, it feels weird, but a lot of people have passed in that ministry young. And just this go go go, do do do. God is going to take care of us. God is going to take care of me. I don't have to take care of myself. And then when you disagree with that, but so that even led to me, like I said, just for years feeling like it's wrong of me to want to take a step back. And like I said, I just thank God for deliverance. I thank God for his word. And it's just like, we have to test the spirit by the spirit. And I'm like, no, like, it ain't something that's not lining up with that. God is not calling us to be robots and to never take a break. Like, and I'm just like, I don't want to be one of these people who's just like, yeah, we doing all of these honorable things. And I'm like, man, even when these people pass away, you see all of the condolences and all of this stuff, and everybody comes and gives them their flowers. But I'm like, man, I would rather be able to live to see my grandchildren. I look at my grandma, and no, nothing against her. Like, my grandmother was an amazing woman. Honestly, her spirit was just so big that sometimes it's even this happened over 10 years ago, her passing, and sometimes it's just like I still can't even, it doesn't register that she's passed away, just because her spirit was just so big and who she was. But So even just going with that, we have to watch what we're listening to. We gotta watch who, what we're really believing. And not, like I said earlier, like, what is the lie that we are believing? And I realized, like, I was believing a lie that I had to go, 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 and go. I had to do all the time. And if it was for ministry, that automatically meant that it was for God. But that is not true. Y'all, it's people, we could be doing stuff for ministry all day and God be like, I ain't tell you to do none of that. And it's like sometimes the line between what's God and what's ministry gets blurred. It really gets blurred. And it's things that we will, just because our ministry leader asked us to do something, we automatically think God is asking us to do it, and that's not true. And I think it's just we're a highly spiritual people, and I just think that it's important for us to know that if it's going to jeopardize our physical health, like 9 times out of 10 it ain't God. I'm sorry. It ain't God. If it's going to jeopardize our physical well-being, our mental well-being, our spirit, like our emotional well-being, we really got to check the source, because just because it's coming out of the mouth of a ministry leader, or just because a ministry leader is inviting us into a thing, it doesn't necessarily mean it is God. And I'm grateful too, I'll put this out there, to have been around so many amazing ministry leaders who understand, who they like, look, we're not about to ask you to do all this stuff. Do what God is telling you to do. So I just wanted to put that out there, you guys. Like I said, I hope that this helps somebody. I hope that this speaks to someone, even those of you that aren't here on this live but might see this later. It's okay to rest. Like, God gives us permission to rest. We got to know what season we're in. There's different seasons. There may be seasons where he's like, go. I'm going to be your strength. And in your weakness, my strength is made perfect. Like, but I need you to go. But there's going to be seasons, y'all. God ain't telling us to just go, 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 go all day, every day for the rest of our lives. No, that's not him. His yoke is easy and his burden is light. So, yes, is there a lot of ground that we may feel like we have to cover in our community to play catch up? Sure, maybe, but God is sovereign, and we have to leave space for him to do those things. That's all I want to share with you guys today. I hope that this blessed you. And until next time, see ya.